Well, the vultures still seem to be circling BlackBerry. Its stock remains in a sometimes violent spiral. Rumors about unsold inventory keep floating, and consumers seem to be abandoning the product in huge numbers. What happened and why? The bottom line is at the table tonight, minus Patty Croft, who is searching for spirit bears on the BC coast. And don't we wish we were all with her. But helping us out tonight, analyst and mobile specialist Krista Napier. She's joining our regulars. Jim Stanford, economist with Unifor. Preet Banerjee, freelance broadcast journalist and writer. And our senior business correspondent, Amanda Lang. Their thoughts in a moment. But first, these basics. As you may know, you carry Canada on your belt. That BlackBerry is a Canadian invention. Oh, to be back in the day. BlackBerry on top of the world in the grasp of the most powerful person in the world.
I'm still clinging to my BlackBerry. They're going to pry it out of my hands.
That was 2008, when stock was around $150 a share. Now it's just under $9. In those days, there were about 20,000 employees worldwide. With the latest layoffs, that's heading down to 8,200. Then, more than half of smartphone users carried BlackBerries. It was number one. Now, they're running at best third behind iPhones and Android. In the current fiscal, second quarter losses are expected to be close to $1 billion. On the upside, you'll find BlackBerries in 175 countries, and the company still has 72 million subscribers. That's a lot of cash flow. And perhaps that's what's prompted this.
The struggling smartphone maker has agreed to a tentative offer.
A consortium of Canadian investment companies has offered $4.7 billion.
Just yesterday, an offer from BlackBerry's biggest shareholder, Fairfax Financial, to take over the company for $4.7 billion. So, what happens next? And what does it mean for those of us using BlackBerries right now? Good questions. Let's get some answers. All right, let's start with that question. If you've got a BlackBerry now, what does all this mean to you?
For the phone that you've got in your hands, and hopefully you keep it in your hands, it means nothing. The company's still here, the platform's still here. It's a very, very high quality device, and just keep on using it.
Not to worry.
No, not in terms of what you've got today. And for most businesses, you know, it's the strongest in the professional network area. They will keep using it as well, I believe.
Amanda.
I'd agree with that. I mean, the short term, nothing's going to change. What we do know, though, is the company has stated its strategy will shift away from the consumer and back to the enterprise. We can talk about whether that's the right thing to do or not, which means that if you are a consumer holding it, you can't expect to be supported forever. So it's not exactly clear what it means a year from now or 2 years from now today, and for the weeks ahead, it's business as usual.
All right, Krista, you're in the market for a smartphone. Do you sort of walk right past the BlackBerry booth, or do you look at it?
Yeah, you're definitely going to look at it, especially if you're a business. We know in polling Canadian organizations, when they go to buy a new phone this year, 59% are planning to buy another BlackBerry. So it is very much still top of mind. One of the things that they need to watch out for, though, is with the new trend, bring your own device into the office, it's less often the business that's dictating the phones that are going to be purchased, and more often the employee. And the employees are looking at some of those other devices, Android and iOS devices.
Preet.
I think it's the death of the physical keyboard. And, you know, I was a diehard BlackBerry user for years, and then I switched carriers and signed a 1,000-year contract or whatever it was. I got an iPhone, so I was stuck with it. But after 6 months, I couldn't go back. The trade-off between the screen size and the physical keyboard just wasn't worth it for me, because now media is so rich, a lot of videos and gesture-based applications. It's tough to go back to a keyboard and sacrifice the screen.
All right, let's talk about this offer for a second. Fairfax Financial, $4.7 billion. Is this the best case scenario for BlackBerry as a company right now?
Absolutely not. The best case scenario would have been a strategic purchase by a player who could actually invest in BlackBerry where it actually made some sense. So Microsoft, for instance, would be one, and may still come out of the woodwork. We may still see a strategic buyer emerge here. This may well be a kind of a floor that they've put under the share price.
I remember when they were talking about Microsoft buying RIM when it was like $120 a share.
That's right.
They're still talking about this possibility?
Well, what happens, of course, when you become the sum of your parts is people will take another look at you. There is stuff here that's of great value, and Microsoft, we know, is trying to get into this space. Now, when we saw them do the deal with Nokia not long ago, I think a lot of us said, very bad day for Research in Motion because they don't need them anymore. There's still value here. That would be better than this. This is private is, you know, it gives them maybe a shot at something, but strategic would be the right thing.
Jim?
I think this deal has got many promising features. It does keep BlackBerry whole rather than stripping it apart and selling off the parts. So,
But do we actually know that? With any
well, we don't
certainty?
know it for sure.
We don't know what they
I mean,
do if they actually succeed.
Yeah, certainly.
Right?
The buyer is saying, or the tentative buyer is saying he wants to keep it whole and operate it as a going concern. And Mr. Watsa has some strong ties in Canada, obviously in Waterloo with the university there. He understands, I think, the eco-culture around there that helped BlackBerry become what it was. And it would keep it in Canada. The problem with Microsoft buying it is they may find some little bits that they like, but Microsoft, unless there's some policy constraint on the company from government, Microsoft isn't committed to maintaining the operation in Canada. There's no reason to think that they would. So, you know, a lot of questions about it, and of course both sides have 6 weeks to keep shopping around. But this proposal has got some attractive features in terms of BlackBerry's continued presence as an important corporate figure in Canada.
We all know that we live in a high-tech, consumer-driven world, and things change. But it really wasn't that long ago that BlackBerry was #1. So what happened? What went wrong? Great.
It was a series of missteps. We had the playbook. It was, a product that no one wanted. They put it on a fire sale. We have all this stock of the Z10 and Q10s, and carriers are saying people aren't buying it, they want to return it. More iPhones were sold over the weekend than BlackBerrys were sold in the last quarter. So that's telling you, the fortunes of BlackBerry versus everyone else. They're going down, everyone else is gaining more market share.
Krista, what went wrong?
I think they were a victim of their own success. They became so big so quickly, and they were really focusing on the enterprise space. And quietly, you started to see some of these smaller competitors come up behind them that seemed small at the time, Apple, Samsung, some of the others. And, it was a classic case of this disruptive innovation. These other companies came to market with what at the time was really innovative stuff, a touch screen, a robust app store, being able to watch all this different type of media on your phone. And those were the things that consumers were really interested in. And before you knew it, they had, surpassed BlackBerry, and it was too late to catch up.
That's one of the things that people worry about, that they were so focused on business, they didn't see what was happening in the consumer market.
The classic story in tech is you have to stay paranoid. The most successful tech companies stay paranoid all the time about what they're not doing. I think we'll also perhaps find out one day that a lot of this was driven by the two guys that created the business, that there came a certain point in its history when that wasn't working, that partnership stopped working. I think that was clear the way it dissolved. Something went on there, and I think we'll find that internally that may have damaged their ability to actually keep focused on what they needed to do next.
A lot of people are concerned now, worrying about what this crisis for BlackBerry means for the overall Canadian economy. Mm-hmm. Can they overstate that?
Mm-hmm. No, they should be worried. They've already announced 4,500 job cuts, regardless of what happens to the company now. 4,500 lost jobs is the equivalent of closing 2 auto assembly factories at once. We've had a lot of discussion over the last few years about the auto industry in Canada. Think about closing 2 plants in one fell swoop. And then there's all the indirect jobs that depend on those relatively good, high-tech, high-skilled jobs, high-wage jobs in the Kitchener-Waterloo area. I suspect over 10,000 jobs in total would disappear once those layoffs went ahead, let alone if the company itself shrank even further.
Now, some of those jobs are overseas, right? They're not in Canada, that 4,200 we're talking about.
True, yeah, but there's also a kind of a mythology that if they're all engineers, well, they'll find another job in an instant anyway. That's not true at all. The unemployment rate in Kitchener-Waterloo today is already higher than the Ontario average, than the Canadian average. And without, I think, some kind of measures to make sure that you would keep a critical mass in that community, it will get a lot worse.
You're a KW girl, or you spent some time there?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a silver lining here. They did inspire a lot of talent and help to create a lot of talent. I remember I was going to university in Waterloo at the time when they were really coming to fruition, and it was exciting to see what they were doing, and it made me want to get into the tech sector. So that talent doesn't go away. I think it'll manifest itself in other companies and other products, and I think it'll be really exciting to see what comes out of that talent in other areas.
But there is a kind of a field of dreams view that I hear sometimes. That as long as people are skilled and got talent, the companies will come. And skills and talent are important, but they won't in and of themselves create the companies and the jobs.
But you're describing something kind of alarming, this idea that the government should intervene to keep the jobs. I mean, I think in the end, worry isn't the right word. We should feel bad about it, I guess. It was a great Canadian company. We were proud of it. Your interview with Obama brings back those memories. But economies are dynamic. Businesses go under. Little businesses go under all the time, and people start up new ones. When big businesses go under, it's harder and it hurts, but other businesses will grow. We're a dynamic place. Not every one of those engineers will find a job tomorrow, but that there will be another great tech company in Canada is absolutely certain.
But I think nationally speaking, I mean, you've got all these, these two big companies. You have Nortel, it's failed, spectacular collapse. You've got BlackBerry. We don't know what's going to happen, but if you talk to young people, they used to be enthusiastic about that area. Every young person I've talked to who's involved in tech, they aspire to go to the States, right? And that, I think, this might be another nail in that coffin of that mentality, that they don't think that tech will survive in Canada.
You know, a lot of people making the comparison, they have been for the last year or so, but especially in the last week, that, oh, you know, REM, BlackBerry, it's another Nortel. Fair comparison or not fair? Kristen?
You know what, Nortel was split apart in pieces and sold off. Even with the Nokia-Microsoft deal, you know, pieces of Nokia are being purchased to the devices and services business, and Microsoft will license the mapping and some of the patents. In this situation, as we know so far, BlackBerry will be sold as an entire entity, so it's not necessarily being broken apart yet. And so that is a bit different, and they're still alive. They're not dead yet.
Yeah, I know, and we all have to be careful of that, right?
Absolutely.
There is this,
Dead,
especially in the last week or so, there's been this sense that, you know, they're done, they're toast, it's all over. But it's not all over, as we made the point. Go ahead.
It's definitely not all over. I think the biggest difference between Nortel and Research in Motion is just the circumstances that led to their decline. Nortel grew up in the dot-com era, and when all of its customers saw their stocks plummet in 2000 as the dot-com bubble burst, they suddenly didn't have a base to sell to anymore, and then their accounting started to become an issue, and it all sort of snowballed. But they still had great technology. You can't actually fault their technology, as we saw in the eventual sale of the patents, which was enormously successful. This is a very different case. This isn't a company that lost its customers for any reason, except its product didn't keep up.
And the sale of the patents in Nortel, in a way, was not successful. I mean, it might have been successful at extracting a bit of value for the remnants of the shareholders, but for the company and for the country, it was a disaster, and you were left with nothing. And if we go down that route of the sort of strip and flip strategy, sell it off for its component parts, we'll pay a price. We're still paying an economic price in Canada for Nortel's demise. Our R&D spending as a share of GDP, our trade performance in electronic products is still substantially lower than it was when Nortel was still here. And I'm worried we'll experience another step down in all of that if we don't keep BlackBerry here.
Great.
I'm actually somewhat hopeful for the turnaround, and I think it'll be another great story, because if you look at the buyer, Prem Watson, Fairfax Financial, they're long-term value investors. We don't know who is part of the consortium, but the speculation is they're pension plans who have a very long-term view with investing. So if they can actually make a strategic shift in a private space where they don't have to worry about keeping up with the quarterly financial reports to the shareholders, they can make this a turnaround, but it's going to take time, and these are the people to do it.
Let me just phrase it this way. If it's Fairfax Financial or if it's Microsoft or whoever it might be, why would you want BlackBerry? Why would you want this company? Why would you want to buy it?
Well, at this price, I mean, the $4.7 billion is dirt cheap. I mean, by any measure of a tech takeover, this is a really good price for what you're getting. There's a ton of cash. Just today, if you shut the thing down, you're sitting on cash. And there's value there. I mean, there's good technology, and we shouldn't forget that, right? They did go out and bet the farm on this new operating system. Not everybody loves it. It's not doing what they wanted it to do, but it's a great operating system. So, I mean, Krista could probably speak to it better than I can, but there's value in that they, you know, Mike Lazaridis had a vision for this, that this was the operating system that would take their technology into our cars and into a whole bunch of other devices, and that may still come to pass. It just might not be this group that does it.
Just what we want in our cars.
In our cars.
Because, gosh, we got nothing else
Because
to
it'll
do.
drive them for us.
Exactly. Krista, do you want to tell me why they should buy
Amanda's
it?
exactly right. The hardware business has been pulling them down, but there's other pieces there that are growing. You know, the network side is a secure network that so many businesses rely on. The services side of the business is an area that's really growing in Canada. You think of all the devices now that are coming into the enterprise on different platforms, those all need to be managed, and the apps on them need to be managed as well. And BlackBerry has a solution for that. And so that's another area under services where they could continue to pursue that. Lots of competitors in that space, but they could play in it.
All right, we got to take a quick break. But when we come back, the question that the BlackBerry employees and loyalists so want answered: what will BlackBerry look like a year from now? All right, welcome back to the Bottom Line. Patty's away this week, but Krista Napier is joining us, along with regulars Jim Stanford, Preet Banerjee, and Amanda Lang. Okay, I want you to put your best kind of predictor hats on here and tell me and tell BlackBerry loyalists and customers out there what you think we'll be looking at in terms of BlackBerry a year from now. Krista.
I think it's going to be a very different company. What they've been doing to date hasn't been working over the last year. So they're not going to continue down the same path. I think they're going to readjust. If they do go private, it'll give them that opportunity to readjust, potentially getting rid of that hardware piece of the business over time, since it has been weighing them down, and focusing on services and solutions that are growing parts of the business.
But you still see them existing a year from now?
I do.
All right, Jim.
Well, I can't make a prediction, Peter, because I'll probably be wrong, and then you'll run the tape on a future edition of this panel. But I'll tell you what I hope.
Take a chance.
I'll tell you what I hope. Okay. How's that? I hope BlackBerry is still an entity, that it exists as BlackBerry, that it's rooted in Canada, that it's refinanced with patient capital, possibly including pension funds, possibly including the Canada Pension Plan, for all we know, and that they reorient themselves into a line of business, a niche, including the services, as Krista mentioned, that can take them forward. I hope they're still here as a critical mass in our corporate constellation.
All right, Preet is not shy of making a prediction.
Well, I am, actually. I think they're going to look a lot more like IBM. And IBM had similar troubles. You used to see on personal computers IBM stamped on the hardware, but now they've transitioned to software and service, higher margin business, and that is where BlackBerry now has really excelled. So I think they're going to make a move toward that. And IBM survived and flourished, and I think BlackBerry can as well.
Amanda?
Yeah, I mean, I'm leery of predictions because there's so much that can change, and we'll know in the next 6 weeks or so. But I do think the most likely scenario from at this moment is that they go private and that they take some of these steps. The advice that I've heard from every analyst I've talked to, including the one at the table here, is they got to get out of the hardware business. So it's hard to see them not doing that and focus on the stuff that is working, on the enterprise, on their security, and maybe develop some new product around that. So maybe they'll still make a keyboard for somebody who wants it, but somebody else is making that hardware.
Right. We've got time to go once more around the table. What's the main lesson of this story, the BlackBerry story? Preet, you start us.
I think there's big potential in tech. There's big risk, both as shareholders and as employees in Canada. And so you can't forget that.
Amanda.
I just think it's how fast the tech world moves. The thing that we really discovered, you just look at what Samsung's done with its Galaxy phones. iPhone is now being beaten by this phone we hadn't even heard of 2 years ago. So I think it's the speed at which change happens. It's wonderful for consumers. It's very difficult for investors, and it's torture for the entrepreneurs who are doing this stuff.
You think it's wonderful for consumers?
Wonderful.
Just when you figure out how one thing works, it's
I know.
history, and you got to start all over again.
I think it's a good lesson for big companies to keep an eye on the little guy behind you, because he might get really big tomorrow and surpass you.
It sure isn't like the old days, where the big company was the big company and it always stayed the big company.
That's the way Jim wants it, protected by government.
Well, she's answered for me, Peter, so you don't need to ask. I do think there's a bigger structural problem. I mean, what is Canadian business successful at? Digging stuff out of the ground and banking. Those are the two things where our business class has been globally successful, made a lot of money. As far as high-value, globally export-oriented products, we have a few exceptions. You can count them on one hand, and BlackBerry was an exception. Now we're facing question marks about its future, and I think reinforcing the risk that we face as a country about becoming so dependent on resources. I think it is a matter of policy importance. I'm not saying government should bail out BlackBerry or nationalize it, but I do think policy has a role to make sure we have a corporate culture that produces companies like BlackBerry over and over again.
See, you were overstating his position.
No, you're right. And I, in fact, agree completely. Our corporate culture should be entrepreneurial and innovative.
All right. Folded, just like
there
that.
There you go.
Like
Headline news.
Krista, it was great having you with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you as well. I'm sure you have thoughts on this one. Don't be shy. Share them with us at cbcnews.ca/thenational.